The rain was coming down steadily in downtown Seattle that evening, creating a beautiful but moody atmosphere as streetlights reflected off the wet pavement. It had been a long day, but the owner of the city's largest rideshare fleet liked to stay connected with what was happening on the streets. That's why, at least once a week, he'd get behind the wheel of one of his own cars, a sleek, black Tesla Model Y that sparkled even in the dreary weather. He wasn't your typical rideshare driver. At just 35 years old, he'd built his company from the ground up, starting with a single car 5 years ago. Now he managed a fleet of over 200 vehicles, but he never wanted to lose touch with the day-to-day reality of the business. His dad had always told him, "You can't lead what you don't understand," and those words had stuck with him through the years. Tonight was supposed to be just another routine evening of picking up passengers. He'd already completed 6 rides, all perfectly pleasant despite the weather. The Tesla's all-weather tires gripped the wet roads confidently as he pulled up to an upscale restaurant called the Silver Spoon. His next passenger had a perfect 5-star rating, which usually meant an easy ride. Through the rain-streaked windows, he could see a woman standing under the restaurant's elegant awning, tapping away at her phone with obvious irritation. She was wearing what looked like an expensive designer outfit and holding a large umbrella, though she was already completely protected from the rain. The restaurant's soft lighting created a warm glow around her, but her body language suggested anything but warmth. He double-checked the app to confirm he was in the right place, then pulled up carefully to avoid splashing any water. Before he could even think about getting out to help with the door, something he always did for his passengers, she was already marching toward the car, her heels clicking sharply against the wet pavement. The woman yanked open the back door, bringing with her a strong waft of expensive perfume and the unmistakable energy of someone who'd had a few too many drinks with dinner. "You're late," she snapped, though he'd actually arrived 2 minutes ahead of the estimated time shown on the app. "Good evening," he said warmly, choosing to start things off on a positive note. "I hope you haven't been waiting too long. The weather's pretty nasty tonight." Instead of responding, she was already on her phone again, speaking loudly to someone on the other end. "Yeah, I finally got a car. Can you believe I had to wait in this weather?" And she paused, giving him an obvious once-over in the rearview mirror. "Let's just say I'm not thrilled about the situation." He adjusted his mirror slightly and started the drive toward her destination, an upscale apartment complex about 20 minutes away. The Tesla moved smoothly through the wet streets, its electric motor nearly silent. He'd done this route hundreds of times and knew exactly which streets to take to avoid the worst of the construction that was tearing up downtown. Little did his passenger know that she wasn't just sitting in any rideshare vehicle. She was in the flagship car of a multi-million-dollar fleet driven by its owner himself. The leather seats she was currently fidgeting in had been specially selected, the car's maintenance schedule was immaculate, and even the air freshener was a custom blend designed to make passengers feel at ease. But something told him this wasn't going to be like his usual rides. The way she was clutching her designer purse, her constant sighs, and the manner in which she was deliberately avoiding looking at him through the mirror. He'd seen it all before. After years in this business, he could spot trouble brewing from a mile away. Still, he kept his professional demeanor intact, knowing that sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice was simple, unwavering dignity. The first few minutes of the ride passed in tense silence, broken only by the gentle swish of windshield wipers and the woman's manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. Through the rearview mirror, he could see her wrinkle her nose as she looked around the immaculate interior of his Tesla, as if trying to find something to complain about. "I remember when this neighborhood used to be nice," she suddenly announced to no one in particular, her voice carrying that particular tone people use when they want to start trouble but maintain plausible deniability. "Now it's just, well, you know how it is. Everything's changing, and not for the better." He kept his eyes on the road, maintaining his professional composure. After thousands of rides, he'd developed a sixth sense for passengers who were about to make his evening interesting. And not in a good way. This woman was practically reading from a script he'd seen too many times before. "Did you see that group hanging around outside the restaurant?" She continued, now speaking into her phone again. "I told the manager he really needs to do something about that. It's driving away all the good customers." She paused, throwing a pointed glance at the back of his head. "And now look at my situation. I don't feel safe at all. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here she was, sitting in probably the safest car in Seattle's entire rideshare fleet, driven by its owner who had passed every possible background check and safety certification available. The Tesla's advanced security systems were recording every moment from multiple angles, and its location was being tracked by 3 different systems. Rain continued to paint patterns on the windows as they drove past the glowing storefront of a newly opened organic grocery store. "That's another thing," she said, her voice getting louder. "All these new businesses moving in, but the neighborhood's still going downhill. I bet the owner isn't even from around here." He had to suppress a small smile at that one. He actually owned the building that housed that grocery store too. It was one of his first real estate investments, part of his strategy to help revitalize the neighborhood while keeping its character intact. The grocery store owner was a local resident who'd lived in the area for 30 years. The woman's phone rang again, and she launched into another conversation, this time not even trying to be subtle. "You won't believe this ride I'm in right now. I'm going to have to file a complaint with corporate. The standards have just dropped so low. I mean, they're letting anybody drive these days." He checked the GPS. Still 15 minutes to go. The rain was picking up again, drumming against the roof like nature's own percussion section. In the back seat, his passenger was becoming increasingly agitated, probably frustrated by his lack of reaction to her comments. "I'm telling you," she continued into her phone, voice dripping with disdain, "this whole area is just attracting the wrong sort of people. Remember how it used to be? Now you can't even get a decent rideshare driver." The Tesla glided to a smooth stop at a red light, its LED headlights casting a bright path through the rain. He used the moment to adjust his seat slightly, remaining as courteous and professional as ever. In his mind, he was already composing the email he'd send to his fleet managers tomorrow, another teaching moment about handling difficult situations with grace. He could have ended the ride right then, could have pulled over and asked her to exit the vehicle, citing his company's zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. But years of building his business had taught him that sometimes the best lessons come from letting situations play out naturally. Besides, he had a feeling this story was far from over. The light turned green, and as they moved forward, she started digging through her purse, muttering about how she was definitely going to report this to someone who matters. Little did she know, she was about to get her chance to do exactly that, just not in the way she was expecting. The confrontation finally erupted when he turned onto Madison Street. Even though it was the fastest route with all the downtown construction, his passenger wasn't having it. She leaned forward, her designer bracelet clinking against her phone as she gestured sharply. "Why are you going this way?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I take this route all the time, and this is not the right way. Are you trying to run up the fare?" He kept his voice steady and professional, just like he taught all his drivers to do. "There's major construction on the usual route. This way will actually save us about 8 minutes. He gestured toward the dash display showing the navigation route with its real-time traffic updates. "Oh, please," she scoffed, ignoring the clear evidence on the screen. "I know exactly what you're doing. I work in real estate, and I know every street in this city. You people always try these tricks, thinking we won't notice." The rain had settled into a light drizzle now, and the streetlights cast long shadows through the water droplets on the windows. He could have pointed out that he owned several buildings in the area, or that his company had contracts with half the real estate firms in the city. Instead, he simply nodded and said, "I understand your concern. Would you prefer I take a different route?" This seemed to frustrate her even more. She pulled out her phone again, making sure he could hear every word as she dialed. "Yes, I need to report a driver," she announced loudly. "He's deliberately taking the long way, and I don't feel comfortable at all." "No, you don't understand. This is exactly what's wrong with letting just anybody drive these days." He glanced at his own phone mounted on the dashboard. The ride was being recorded from multiple angles as always. The GPS tracking showed they were actually making better time than expected. Years of experience had taught him to document everything, a lesson that had saved his business more than once. "I want him fired," she continued into her phone, her voice getting louder. "I don't care what you have to do. I know people at your corporate office, and believe me, they'll hear about this. We can't have drivers like this representing your company." The irony of her words almost made him smile. The thought of her trying to get him fired from his own company was almost worth the headache this ride had become. But he had bigger concerns. This was exactly the kind of situation he warned his drivers about in training sessions. "I can pull over right here if you'd like to cancel the ride," he offered calmly. "There's a well-lit coffee shop just ahead where you can wait for another car." "Oh no," she said, finally hanging up her phone. "You're not getting out of this that easily. I'm documenting everything. Every single turn you're taking, every minute you're adding to this ride. I want your supervisor's direct number, and I mean your actual supervisor, not some customer service line." He turned onto the final stretch of road, the Tesla's wheels humming quietly on the wet pavement. The woman was now furiously typing on her phone, probably drafting some scathing review or complaint. If she only knew she was about to get exactly what she asked for, his direct number as the owner of the fleet. "And another thing," she added, her voice dripping with condescension. "I can't believe they let drivers use cars like this." "A Tesla? Really? I bet you're just trying to show off something that isn't even yours." That was the comment that finally made him decide this would be a teaching moment, not just for her, but for all his drivers who dealt with similar situations. Sometimes the best way to handle prejudice wasn't to fight it, but to completely upend its foundations. As they approached her destination, she was already gathering her things, clutching her purse like she was preparing for an escape. "I hope you've enjoyed your last day as a driver," she said with a smirk. "Because once I'm done reporting you, you'll be lucky to get a job washing cars." The Tesla glided to a smooth stop in front of her building. The moment of truth had arrived, and he reached for his business card holder, ready to give her exactly what she'd been asking for, though it wouldn't be quite what she expected. The next few minutes would become a masterclass in handling difficult situations, though not in the way his passenger expected. As they continued through the rain-slicked streets, he decided to take a different approach. Instead of staying silent, he'd start asking questions. "You mentioned you work in real estate," he said pleasantly, keeping his eyes on the road. "What do you think about the new development project on Fifth Avenue?" The question caught her off guard. She'd been in the middle of typing another angry message on her phone, probably composing that complaint she'd been threatening to make. Well, of course I know about it," she stammered, clearly surprised by his knowledge of local real estate. "The property values there have increased quite impressively," he continued, his voice carrying the confident tone of someone who knew exactly what he was talking about. "Especially since they announced the new tech hub moving in." She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. This wasn't following the script she'd expected. "How would you know about property values?" she asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Well," he replied, smoothly navigating around a delivery truck, "when you're managing a fleet of vehicles in this city, you need to understand where the business is growing. Did you know that rideshare demands in that area have increased by 300% since last year?" The woman's reflection in his rearview mirror showed a mix of confusion and irritation. She wasn't used to drivers who could discuss business trends and urban development. "I suppose you read that in some news article," she said dismissively. "Actually, I compiled those statistics myself," he responded calmly. "Just like I analyzed the traffic patterns before choosing this route tonight. Speaking of which, we're making excellent time despite the weather." He could see her trying to process this new information. The perfectly maintained Tesla, his knowledge of real estate development, his understanding of business metrics, none of it fit her preconceptions. "You seem to know an awful lot for just a driver," she said, her tone somewhere between accusatory and uncertain. "I believe in understanding every aspect of a business," he replied. "Tell me, how many vehicles do you think operate in our city's rideshare fleet?" "I don't. What does that have to do with anything?" she sputtered. "It's fascinating, actually," he continued, as if they were having a casual business discussion over coffee. "There are over 200 vehicles in my fleet alone, each one equipped with the latest safety features, regularly maintained, and tracked for quality control. Would you like to know our customer satisfaction ratings?" The woman had stopped typing on her phone. Her earlier confidence was visibly shaking. "Your fleet," she repeated, her voice smaller than before. "Oh yes," he said, taking a smooth turn onto her street. "But before we discuss that, I'm curious about something you said earlier about the neighborhood going downhill. Did you know that small business ownership in this area has increased by 60% in the past 3 years? Many of those businesses are owned by people you might not expect. The rain had almost stopped now, leaving behind a glistening city that sparkled under the streetlights. They were approaching her building, but the atmosphere in the car had shifted dramatically. Her earlier threats about getting him fired seemed to hang awkwardly in the air. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why are you telling me all this?" "Because assumptions can be expensive mistakes in business," he replied, pulling up to her destination. "And I believe in turning difficult situations into learning opportunities. Now, about that supervisor's number you wanted." He reached for his business card holder, knowing that the next few moments would completely reshape this woman's perspective. Sometimes the best way to challenge prejudice wasn't through confrontation, but through a carefully orchestrated revelation that would make someone question everything they thought they knew. The Tesla came to a perfect stop in front of the luxury apartment building, its tires crunching softly on the wet pavement. The woman in the back seat was already reaching for her phone again, probably ready to record whatever supervisor's number she was about to receive. The streetlights cast a soft glow through the car windows, illuminating her expression of smug anticipation. "Before you make that complaint," he said calmly, "let me give you my card. You did ask for the supervisor's direct number, after all." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek business card holder with his company's distinctive logo embossed in silver. "I don't want excuses or explanations," she cut in sharply. "I just want the number for your boss. Your actual boss, not some customer service line." "Oh, I understand completely," he replied, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He pulled out a single card and handed it back to her. "Here's the direct number for the owner and CEO of the entire fleet. He handles all executive decisions personally." She snatched the card from his hand, ready to continue her tirade. But as soon as her eyes fell on the thick, premium cardstock, her expression froze. The card gleamed under the interior lights, displaying not just a phone number, but a full executive title. "Chief Executive Officer," she read aloud, her voice suddenly uncertain. "Owner and founder." Her eyes darted between the card and the driver's face in the rearview mirror, making the connection she'd been too prejudiced to see before. "That's right," he said quietly. "I'd own this entire fleet. Over 200 vehicles operating across the city. This Tesla you've been riding in, it's the flagship car of my company. Those statistics I mentioned about neighborhood development, they come from my company's market research department. And that route you were so concerned about? I personally design our navigation algorithms to account for construction and traffic patterns." The woman's face had gone from confident to confused to mortified in the span of seconds. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the business card, reading the impressive list of credentials and achievements listed beneath his name. But you're just a driver," she stammered, her whole worldview visibly crumbling. "I'm never just anything," he responded calmly. "And neither are any of my drivers. Every person behind the wheel of my vehicles is a professional who deserves respect. I drive regularly to stay connected with my business and to experience what my employees experience. It helps me make better decisions as a CEO." He turned slightly in his seat to face her directly for the first time. "My company's assets are worth millions. We have contracts with every major rideshare platform in the city, and we're expanding to 3 more states next month. But what matters most to me is how we treat people, all people." The woman's earlier bravado had completely evaporated. She stared at the business card like it was some kind of optical illusion, then back at him, then at the immaculate interior of the Tesla. Everything she dismissed or criticized suddenly took on a new meaning. I didn't realize," she began, but her voice trailed off. "Most people don't," he said kindly. "They make assumptions based on what they see, or what they think they see. But success doesn't look like any one type of person, neither does professionalism, intelligence, or business acumen." He gestured to the card she was still clutching. "That number you wanted, it's right there. Though I should mention that as the owner, I have a strict policy about discriminatory behavior toward my staff. And since I was today's staff," he let the implications of that sink in. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving behind a clear night sky. Through the windshield, the city lights sparkled like stars, reflecting off the wet streets. It was the same beautiful view he'd seen thousands of times before, but tonight it felt particularly meaningful. "Your total fare is displayed on the screen," he said professionally, as if the last 20 minutes of her insults and threats hadn't happened. "Though I have a feeling this ride might end up costing you a bit more than money, it might just cost you some of your preconceptions." The silence in the car was deafening. The woman's face had cycled through more shades of red than a sunset, and her designer purse sat forgotten in her lap. The business card trembled slightly in her hands as the full weight of her actions started to sink in. "You mean?" She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "All this time I've been threatening to have the company owner fired." He finished for her, his voice level. "Yes, but more importantly, you've demonstrated exactly why I occasionally drive these routes myself. It's enlightening to see how some passengers treat people they assume are just drivers." He pulled up the ride history on his phone. "Would you like to know something interesting? You've actually used my fleet services 17 times in the past month. Different drivers, different cars, but all my employees. I wonder, did you treat them the same way you treated me tonight?" The woman's hands flew to her mouth as the implications hit her. Not only had she insulted a successful business owner to his face, but she'd probably been leaving a trail of similarly poor behavior across his entire fleet. I can explain," she started, but he raised his hand gently. "There's no need to explain," he said calmly. "But there is something you should know. Every car in my fleet is equipped with state-of-the-art cameras and audio recording systems. We use them to protect both our drivers and our passengers. Tonight's ride has been documented from multiple angles, including all the comments about certain people and your threats." He turned slightly in his seat, making eye contact with her in the mirror. "Our company has a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. It's written right there in the terms of service you agree to every time you book a ride. As the owner, I take these policies very seriously." The woman clutched her purse tighter, her earlier confidence completely shattered. "Are you going to post the video online?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm not interested in public shaming," he replied. "That's not how I do business. However, I will be adding a flag to your account. You won't be able to book rides with any of my fleet's vehicles going forward. That's over 200 cars across multiple platforms that will no longer be available to you." The reality of her situation was finally hitting home. In a city where reliable rideshare services were essential, she just lost access to one of the largest fleets because of her own prejudiced behavior. "But how will I get around?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. "I use these services every day for work." "That's something you'll need to figure out," he said professionally. "Just like my drivers have to figure out how to handle difficult situations every day. The difference is they don't have a choice about facing discrimination. You do have a choice about how you treat others." He pulled up her ride details on the dashboard screen. "Your fare tonight is $28.50. I'll be processing it as usual, but I'm also sending you an email documenting why your account is being suspended. I believe in transparency in business dealings." The woman fumbled with her phone, probably trying to think of some way to salvage the situation. "I could write an apology," she began. "Actions have consequences," he said firmly. "And sometimes those consequences include losing access to services you've taken for granted. Think of it as a learning opportunity, much like this entire ride has been." He gestured to his business card that she was still holding. "You wanted to speak to someone in charge about the declining standards in this neighborhood. Well, as someone who owns not just this fleet, but several properties in the area, I can tell you that the only standards declining are the ones allowing people to treat service workers as less than human." The night air was cool and clear now, the earlier rain having washed everything clean. It felt fitting somehow, like nature itself was offering a fresh start. But some stains, like the ones on a reputation, take more than rain to wash away. The story could have ended there, with a humbled passenger and a quiet lesson learned. But real change has a way of rippling outward, touching more lives than we expect. In the days that followed, the woman tried to do damage control in the only way she knew how, by posting on social media. Her post started with the usual complaints. "You won't believe what happened to me in a rideshare." She probably thought she'd get sympathy. Instead, she got something entirely different when the company's official account responded with the complete dash cam footage. The video spread like wildfire across social media platforms. Not because it was another gotcha moment, but because of how the owner handled the situation. People were struck by his calm professionalism in the face of prejudice, his measured responses, and the way he turned discrimination into a teachable moment. Local news picked up the story. Business owner drives own fleet to stay connected with customer experience, read one headline. Another proclaimed, CEO's undercover ride exposes discrimination in rideshare industry. But the owner had bigger plans than just viral fame. He used the unexpected spotlight to launch something new, a driver entrepreneurship program. Success doesn't look like what people expect, he explained in interviews. Neither does a CEO, a business owner, or a driver. Let's change that. The program offered drivers from all backgrounds a chance to learn about fleet management, business operations, and eventually, ownership opportunities. It wasn't charity, it was smart business. Who better to run a rideshare fleet than someone who understood the industry from the ground up? Within weeks, applications flooded in. Drivers who'd faced similar discrimination saw an opportunity to change their futures. The owner partnered with local business schools to create specialized training programs. He opened up his company's data to show exactly how he'd built his fleet from one car to hundreds. The woman's social media backfire had accidentally sparked a movement. Other rideshare companies started examining their own policies. Customers began sharing stories of exceptional drivers who deserved more recognition. The conversation shifted from complaints about service to discussions about opportunity. 3 months after that rainy night, the first group of drivers graduated from the entrepreneurship program. Among them was a former teacher who'd started driving to supplement her income. Now she was launching her own small fleet. Another graduate had driven for years while studying business at night. He was now managing operations for a new branch of the company. The owner kept driving occasionally, but now he had company. Other CEOs and business leaders in the city started taking shifts in their own company's front lines. "You can't lead what you don't understand" became a mantra in business circles. As for the woman who started it all, she found herself watching from the sidelines as her former rideshare service transformed into one of the city's most respected businesses. Her attempt to get a driver fired had instead fired up a revolution in how people viewed service industry workers. The dashcam footage from that night became required viewing in the company's training program. Not to shame anyone, but to show how professionalism and dignity can be more powerful than anger or revenge. New drivers learned that success isn't just about where you're going, it's about how you treat people on the way there. 1 year later, the owner stood in front of a packed room at a business leadership conference. The topic wasn't about rideshare services or fleet management. It was about breaking stereotypes and creating opportunities. Sometimes, he told the audience, the best way to change minds isn't through confrontation, but through demonstration. Show people what they refuse to see. He ended his speech by holding up his business card, the same design that had shocked his prejudiced passenger that night. "Your position doesn't make you powerful," he said. "How you use your position to empower others, that's what matters." The rain was falling again as he left the conference, just like it had that night. But this time, when he got into his Tesla to give a few rides, he wasn't alone. A whole new generation of driver entrepreneurs was out there too, each one ready to shatter someone's preconceptions about what success looks like.